Corey is going to share a lot of data that Airship have developed, from a survey they've done recently. So it's based on a lot of sort of primary data. So, and I've had a sneak preview, and there's a lot of great data to share. So I think if it seems like we've got a good number online now, so we may as well start kicking off. Just to say, I'm James. I will be your host for the day and introduce Corey and from Business of Apps. And I'll hand you over to him now for the content. Okay, well, over to you, Corey. Please give him a big virtual welcome to the stage.
Thanks, everyone. It's so great to see everybody from around the world. And thank you, James. So I'm actually Vice President of Communications at Airship, where I've been for the past decade. I used to have a lot more hair when I started, but it's really a pleasure to join you today and share some of our latest research. Currently, in the climate that we're in, right, we believe every business needs to focus on generating greater value today. And the best place to do that is to start with your best customers. And I think most of us here, given we're with Business of Apps, would agree that a brand's best customers are those that have its app. In fact, industry research supports this. It shows that app-based customers generate 3.5 times more revenue than non-app customers. And additionally, app customers are 3 times more likely to make a repeat purchase than those that do not have the app. I think we see this every day in our personal and professional lives, right? Apps really becoming the preferred destination for consumers. And every quarter we see earnings reports emphasizing mobile apps as the digital center of customer experience and value creation. One of our customers, Kingfisher, they're a home improvement holding company headquartered in the UK. They have about 8 different brands, or as they call them, banners, including B&Q and Screwfix. They recently said that mobile will remain their focal point for end-to-end customer journey and experience, and they've seen their orders up 200% over fiscal year. On the other side of the pond, another one of our customers, the Home Depot, their most recent earnings call cited record downloads, traffic, and sales from its app. Home Depot focuses on a frictionless, interconnected shopping experience. Very great words there, right? At the end of 2021, they actually announced that its sales from its digital platforms grew 100% over the past 2 years. And actually 50% of their online orders are fulfilled through its stores. So with that, we're at our first polling question. You click the tab down there and provide an answer, and we'll kind of take a look at how you think of your mobile app experience of your brand. I'm going to pop that open now. That's great. So far, we've got a few votes for extraordinary value. Looks like most of you have selected average value in terms of what your app offers your business and your customers. I think that's pretty much in line with what we've been seeing in research, right? You've got companies like Kingfisher and the Home Depot producing exceptional results. And you have many others, brands that are really just getting started with mobile app experiences. I think as we look out into data across the industry, right, the really great news is that the global app downloads are up and they continue to grow year after year, right? I think bad news and, kind of the daunting challenge for any app publisher is that retention rates have barely budged for the last few years. So let's take a look, just a quick look at that in a bit more detail. I think everybody's familiar. There's this chasm of no return, right? Here you kind of see the entire mobile app customer life cycle. And, this chasm of no return may in fact hit anywhere within this life cycle, or at least, it may be felt deeply in several areas throughout this life cycle. But the data that we've seen really suggests that that messaging customers to drive them to your app only really goes so far in improving retention rates. You can see the last significant step change in retention rates was going from 2018 to 2019. We believe too many brands are really stuck doing what they've always done, which, as this research will show you, is relying on developers to improve the experience. And then marketers, are simply using the app as a blunt promotional channel instead of a relationship builder. They're driving customers to the app, but they're not holding on to them. Holding on to customers is hard, right? It calls for in-app experiences tailored to the individual, engaging them in the moments they're actually engaged with your brand. And so as we set about to do this research, right, we really wanted to understand, why do some brands see exceptional value from apps and others struggle? Obviously customers need to be able to find your app, download it, register or authenticate or in some way identify. And then they have to obviously value it enough to keep using it, which means the teams that manage mobile apps are very large and diverse, right? And they often span both technical and non-technical roles. Those roles speak different languages. And as you'll see from some of our results, they even view the world a bit differently. And so specifically, we looked at marketing-oriented roles, which we'll call marketers, but it could include marketers as well as mobile product owners. And on the other side of the equation, we looked at IT and engineering, or who we'll refer to as developers. And we basically surveyed both of these groups to see how well they work together, and to identify the gaps that they're experiencing in achieving mobile app excellence. Many of our findings were actually not that surprising. We saw nearly universal agreement across several of these, right? It's not really a surprise at all that virtually all developers say waiting to get app enhancements to market has a significant business impact. It's also not that surprising that marketers and mobile product owners remain reliant on developers nearly totally, right, to improve app experiences. And at the same time, marketers agree that experiences like feature tutorials and opt-in flows have a significant impact on user behavior, right? But meanwhile, developers, they're most focused on the next major new app features and bug fixes. And those are the two things that drive their app release cadence most. Fulfilling marketing team requests, and this will soon be shown to be a pretty big problem, is really a distant third priority for developers. Marketers and mobile product owners are heavily invested in the success of mobile apps. The vast majority are thinking of ways to improve onboarding, feature adoption, opt-in, data collection, and more on a weekly basis to drive greater value for the business and as well as their customers. But herein lies the problem, right? They're reliant on developer resources to make any improvements. And as you can see here, this is not a small problem. Even worse, marketers' reliance on developers is likely not even perceived by them to be as big of a problem as it is. So we basically, we've got a lot of data here, and you'll be able to get the full report at the end of the presentation here, but we segmented it out across SMB, lower mid-market, upper mid-market, and enterprise companies. And when we looked at enterprises in particular, enterprise marketers claim that their requests to enhance all of these things critical to the app's success are handled immediately within the next app update. However, when we actually ask the developers the same question, the folks that, again, the marketers rely on to do all of this, twice as many developers as marketers said those requests take a month or multiple months. So while we've shared a bit of data here, we're going to kind of dive into 7 operational gaps we see that span the entire mobile app customer lifecycle. First, acquisition. It's obviously the first critical step in achieving success with an app. We have insight into over a decade of data across organic and paid search within the app stores. And it shows that apps can generate up to 50% of their traffic from keywords related to the features and functionality of their apps. That means that even the most well-known brand is leaving half of its growth story up for grabs if they don't optimize for non-branded keywords. Our survey found that 89% of developers cited good or great capabilities, either monitoring visibility and conversion in the app stores regularly or daily. Likewise, 2/3 of marketers run App Store optimization experiments monthly, including 27% that do so weekly. However, 20% of developers at enterprise companies admit they could do better, and 41% of enterprise marketers experiment quarterly or less often, far greater percentages than what we saw with smaller companies. Next up, we're taking a look at release cadence. And as you remember, right, all developers agree essentially that waiting to get app enhancements to market significantly impacts the business. So what impacts the speed of those app releases? For companies of all sizes, major new features are the primary factor driving their cadence. The second most common driver for everybody other than SMBs was bug fixes. Marketing and product team requests were considerably more impactful for enterprises, with 25% saying that they drove the app release cadence. But it's still third in terms of priorities for developers. We also asked, and I don't have a chart here, we also asked developers, however, what factors affect the predictability of their app release cycle. And QA testing was the single most important factor. Additionally, 1/3 of enterprise companies cited internal approvals as the second factor most impacting predictability. So once an app is downloaded, marketers and mobile product owners are under increasing pressure to make those relationships blossom, especially as paid user acquisition campaigns become less targeted. Onboarding experiences are the single greatest lever that marketing and mobile product teams have to turn new downloads into engaged users and ultimately loyal customers. While most developers said it takes multiple weeks to build and deploy either a multi-screen feature tutorial or opt-in flow or a preference center, 1/3 of enterprise developers estimated a month or multiple months or admitted they don't have these experiences. And this just accounts for the time required to build these experiences, not optimize them over time, which we'll shed some light on soon. Next up is customer surveys. And again, we saw the same sort of lackluster performance in the enterprise segment in particular, right? You would think enterprise marketers in particular would survey customers more often than smaller companies, right? They tend to have larger resources, larger audiences, and a greater need for targeting given larger portfolios. That turns out that's not necessarily the case. More than 40% of enterprises survey their customers quarterly or less often. And that's a huge miss, considering every interaction you have with someone is an opportunity to improve their experience as well as learn more about them. I wanted to share just a glimpse of data we had from a consumer survey we did of 9,000 consumers, just to illustrate the point of how critical surveys can be. As you can see here, ahead of more traditional information like postal addresses or demographics, consumers are more likely to share their interests relevant to a brand, their communication preferences, and what they've browsed on a brand's app or website. And this is great news for brands with apps. People want a much more customer-centric approach, and they're willing to share valuable information in exchange for mobile-enabled conveniences and personalized services, which in turn allows those brands to serve them better and again, make opt-out much less likely. So consumers will really tell you what they want. You just have to let them. For our sixth operational gap, we took a look at experience optimization, right? And again, while developers are primarily focused on major new features and QA testing, it's critical that companies continually assess and adapt feature tutorials, opt-in flows, welcome series to really maximize the benefit from what they already have in market. Overall, 35% of companies said they improve these types of experiences on a quarterly basis or less often. And that jumps to nearly 50% of enterprise companies. Fully 1/4 of enterprise marketers and developers were either not sure when they had last updated their app's preference center, or they said it had been 1 to 2 years or longer. Consumers today really want control over the topic, frequency, and channel with which they receive brand messages. And more than 40% of consumers are much more likely to stay opted in if they're given these types of controls. Which brings us to our final polling question. How would you rate the relationship between your app's technical and non-technical teams? Let's see what the data says here. So it looks like we've got several votes in. That's great. That's great. I think, as I'm looking at the data, I mean, I think it mirrors really strongly with what we found, right? I think Airship, obviously, we've been around since 2009, right? We've seen mobile advance considerably in those years, and really believe that a decade of apps and the growing importance of apps has improved relationships across diverse teams. For example, in our survey, not a single respondent chose the 2 most negative characterizations, difficult or uncooperative. In fact, half of developers said they work very well with marketers and mobile product owners. And another 37% of developers said marketers are decent partners. Marketers were even more positive about their relationships with developers. 62% said they work very well together, and 29% said they are decent partners. Overall, only 12% of developers and 9% of marketers characterized their relationships as contentious discussions, but this skewed much higher at SMBs and at enterprise companies. So we've only really touched on a portion of the insights in our mobile app experience gap survey. But I think the data that we've shown you, as well as the industry data that we've integrated, really clearly point to the need for brands to have greater agility in creating and optimizing experiences that reward customers and reward customers for their loyalty in the moments they're actually engaged with the app. Simply messaging people outside of the app experience, or even inside the app with pop-ups, will only go so far. And we've seen how that has played out over the last few years of retention rates barely budging. I wanted to share just a tiny bit of data again from the consumer survey we did of 9,000 consumers. I think this sheds a little bit of light on why messaging only goes so far. If you remember the slide I showed you that basically said what types of information are consumers most likely to share with a brand, email was at the top of that list, right? It continues to remain the top piece of information consumers will share with brands. But consumer behaviors suggest they don't consider it important or sensitive piece of information. For starters, more than 3/4 of global respondents ignore or delete ignore or delete without reading a brand's email half of the time or more. And what we see here by looking at some of the younger generations is that they're simply more likely to simply ignore emails altogether. 27% of Gen Z don't often check email, and the same percentage use a secondary email account that they rarely check. It's their junk email address, right? Compared to boomers, Gen Z and millennials together are more than 4 times as likely to use anonymous or fake email addresses, and more than twice as likely to say they don't often check their email. Messages can be easy to ignore. Experiences are not. So a little brief commercial about Airship. We acquired GummyCube, which was the leading app store optimization platform, in June, to give brands a much more powerful way to acquire more quality app users. And now, together with our platform, for the first time ever, brands have a complete set of solutions for end-to-end mobile app experience optimization. The Airship App Experience Platform, or what we call AXP, combines customer journey orchestration, app UX experimentation, and no-code native app experiences, going far beyond messaging-centric approaches prevalent in the industry today. With AXP, product and digital and marketing teams are empowered to create and adapt no-code native app experiences on their own without ongoing developer support or app updates. This gives them full control to rapidly onboard app audiences, build out first and zero-party data collection, and really accelerate monetization. Our mission at Airship is to make it even easier for brands to deliver elegant mobile app experiences using low and no-code solutions. That means app teams can get things done more quickly and at a lower cost. Marketers can create and continually optimize things like welcome series and feature tutorials or customer data collection, things that most of them are thinking about every single week, while developers obviously have more time not having to deal with all of that to focus on market differentiating features that'll drive the next wave of success for your app. So we hope you found this content and research valuable. And we have some additional resources here that we believe will help you create more value for your business as well as your customers. I'd like to open it up for any particular questions you may have.
Great, thanks, Corey. Okay, so I think it would be good to, so yeah, if anyone's got any questions, please leave them in the tab. Ravi, yeah, I was going to suggest that actually, Ravi. So I don't know if we can go back there. That was quite interesting data. So, Corey, this retention data you've got, day 7, day 14, day 30 by year, and split by iOS and Android. And I guess this is coming from Airship's sort of across a range of different apps Airship's working with, different sectors. Yeah,
that's right. We've also integrated some market intelligence data as well. So yeah, you can see, right? I mean, you know, there may be some incremental gains that folks have achieved on average, again, over the last few years, but the last major step change in improvement was really back 2018 going to 2019.
Right. So yeah, I didn't. The first thing that dropped out to me was, yeah, this overall there has been, you know, pretty big jump, you know, almost kind of doubling the you know, on most of them, most of the metrics, yeah, maybe a bit more on iOS. And you're right, the inflection point was 2018. Is that, you know, to do with push notifications coming in or some sort of specific?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, obviously, you know, we at Airship sent the very first third-party app notification back in 2009, right? So we've been at that for quite a long time. We also had some of the first in-app messaging experiences, but you know, right around 2018, a lot of vendors, including ourselves, were adding support for email and for SMS, and we also do messaging over mobile wallet cards, loyalty passes, for example. And I really think, you know, right around 2018 is where everybody started to focus a bit more on more effective cross-channel orchestration, really making sure that, you know, you were reaching out through triggers based on people's behavior and things like that to reach people on the channels that they preferred. But again, anything happening outside of the app experience, it's super easy to ignore, right? I can't tell you what a burden email has become for me personally. You know, however, if I'm actually engaged with a brand and I'm getting value out of the actual experience, right, and I'm not being served simply what looks like a blunt promotional pop-up, you know, I'm more than happy to provide, you know, all sorts of information if it's going to make my experience better working with that brand.
Got it. So I guess this may have been skewed a bit if it's kind of Airship data. Maybe the people here were using the platform, so they're maybe getting those sort of benefits of of the, as you say, the things that were rolled out, the messaging at that time. Right, got it.
Right, but I think, if you start looking across thousands of customers, right, things really start to even out, right, in terms of like, obviously we've got massive brands that have been crushing mobile app experiences for quite some time. We've got the full range of folks in different levels of mobile maturity.
And Ian is asking a question, and thanks, Ian. He wants to know. He says, you mentioned messaging. Will only go so far. Is that specifically related to retention? So I guess, you were saying to cross this chasm, messaging is one thing. Messaging outside the app is even less effective. Are you sort of agitating for, what other sort of solutions you pushing then?
Yeah, I think that the interesting thing about how we've approached no code native app experiences is we've really focused in on the high value actions that help a new user understand how to use an app, help a new user understand which features are most valuable, helping the marketer really learn more about what each particular individual cares about. And all of that really feeds, a cycle of continuous improvement, right? If through every single interaction with you, or maybe every fifth interaction with you on my app, I can learn another piece of information about you and make your future experiences or even your future messages much more relevant, right? That's going to create a better experience for for both the customers as well as the business in terms of the results that they're driving. So I think, obviously things like, like surveying your customers are important. But doing it in a progressive fashion, I think, is even more critical, right? You're not trying to kind of load up the 5 questions the first time you're really interacting with a customer. You're kind of metering out what you need to learn, where you need to learn it. And in fact, you can now start to combine the concept of onboarding experiences with survey questions, right? So, I think really kind of serving the individual within their context, right? What are they trying to achieve? And when you're asking for various permissions, are you asking when it makes sense within that individual's context? These are all things that, marketers and mobile product owners think about all of the time. But, they've been completely reliant on developers to execute on any of those ideas. So, we think just by giving them much greater agility to do some of these high value actions on their own, it's going to really improve the results that they're seeing.
Right. So this was your point. I was quite surprised that this 97% are reliant on developers to do pretty much anything UX related on the app. And it surprised me a little bit that people are still, completely dependent on having someone to actually create code just to alter the user interface of the app. I thought it'd be high, but maybe not quite so high.
Well, you look at some of the things that marketers have done with apps, in the past, right? And a lot of it is creating HTML or web views, within an app, which tend to bring along their own series of challenges. I mean, number one, you have to know some HTML, which is code, right? And that can actually be pretty complicated when brands try to kind of match their style and all of their creative specs and that type of thing. But it then creates what a user experiences as a very disjointed experience, right? Not to mention the fact that if you're going to collect data from those HTML views, now you've got to instrument those pages with JavaScript, so more code, right? And then to top it off, right, you're not really even tapping into a lot of the accessibility features that Apple and Android have baked into their operating systems, right? So we think there's marketers have tried to leverage HTML in a way to give them some of this agility, but it's created a lot of problems downstream.
Great. And just looking at the polls we had, so the first one was thinking about your company's mobile app experience. How much value does it offer your business and customers? So yeah, majority was sort of average, or a few sort of 20% extraordinary, some above average, which I guess is maybe doesn't align with what we sort of saw earlier about the importance of the app channel and how the apps are delivering more revenue, more value. But maybe that is in line with what you think. There's a lot of people with okay apps, and the smaller number with really great user experience and value.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually pleasantly surprised to see 20% of our audience today cited extraordinary value, right? And I think as you look, particularly, we are a big fan of quarterly earnings reports, right? Because it provides a lot of insight into not only what brands are achieving today, but how are they planning to continue to maximize that value. But you hear from all of the usual suspects in that regard. Some which may be our customers, or maybe I'm not allowed to say, right? But in any regard, right, there's plenty of others that where their app has really not produced the results that they had hoped, and we know that apps are expensive, right, to build, to maintain, to promote. So it's really of critical importance that brands work to kind of get their mobile app experience right, and then to continue to kind of optimize it across all of the various dimensions, right? Really improving results across that entire mobile app life cycle, from acquisition all the way through to loyalty.
Great. And this one around the relationship between your app's technical and how would you rate the relationship between your app's technical and non-technical teams? 20% said they work very well. The majority, well, not the biggest minority, 42% said they were decent partners. Just under 40% said they had contentious discussions. No one said it was difficult, but again, that I suppose in general, people are working at least okay together. But are you saying through using sort of a platform like Airship or something similar that you're going to improve the relationship because people aren't asking for small kind of features like a survey pop-up or basic personalization or messaging, and this stuff can be sort of done by the marketer?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, think about this question being asked 20 years ago to a website audience, right? I think you would probably see a bit more negative results actually reflected there, right? So I think as I look at the results from this group here, we had many more people actually selecting contentious discussions, right? And I think obviously if you're attending a webinar around how to conquer these mobile app experience gaps, it's a pretty strong indication that you experience some gaps within your own business, and that you're working diligently to kind of understand and improve that, right? So I think this is a bit higher than the kind of 12% of developers and 9% of marketers that we saw in our survey, but this audience may be a bit more demanding of what they expect out of those relationships, right? And if you put yourself in a developer's shoes, right, they've got like massive resource needs, right, to create features that are going to differentiate their app. They're working on, in many cases, multi-year roadmaps, right? So you can imagine probably how it feels once they've launched a new killer feature They've probably done a lot of experimentation to really kind of dial it in. And now half of the marketing team every single week is saying, well, could you just do this? Or could you just do that? And meanwhile, they're trying to kind of move on to their next big project, right? I think, marketers, as we saw, really kind of think that their requests are handled faster than they actually are, right? Which kind of shows just how well developers have done over the past few years as apps have grown in importance to kind of have a bit, a good degree of urgency, right? But these things still take time, right? I mean, with many enterprise developers saying a feature tutorial takes a month or multiple months, right? And that internal approvals is a major factor determining the predictability of their releases. There's a lot of things to work through, right? Where I think both camps would be a lot happier if marketers were more empowered in very controlled but high value ways to actually, deliver native experiences that feel natural to the consumer and end up resulting in the type of data and adoption that they need, right? While developers then are able to kind of focus more on the next major innovations, right?
Got it. Okay, so just to sum up then, this chasm, crossing this chasm between activation, engagement, you're saying, more use of no code, get marketers able to, make changes to their UX without relying on development work, and get some of these sort of basic, customer interfaces, messaging channels, survey channels, personalization available to them to work with directly.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they can create, leveraging our platform, they can create a preference center within their app that not only controls, the types of topics that people will receive app communications about, but all of their other channels as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of this is really, again, treating the app as a relationship builder, versus a promotional channel, right? Making it a destination for your very best customers, right? We know from a lot of brands that, that their app customers are a lot more valuable than those that are not, right? So how can they continue to, to drive people there and hold on to them, right? There's a lot of different things that you can do within each of these life cycle stages to kind of optimize results, right? Prior to us acquiring GummyCube for App Store optimization, right? One of the huge things that we would work with customers in doing is, leveraging their data and their analytics to really focus in on customers that have had obviously some great experiences with your app, and then solicit those folks to go do ratings and reviews within the app stores. And that really dramatically impacts, the visibility as well as the conversion rates of downloads from the app stores, right? So it's certainly not, I'm certainly not suggesting toss out messaging and stop delivering pop-ups to people and, stop trying to, launch campaigns to promote your next big sale. I'm just saying for an app, right? It's a different type of a relationship, right? And so if you can create experiences where the consumer actually feels rewarded for making room on their phone for your app, right? That's going to go a long way in terms of longevity of those relationships, right? You think about your own best relationships personally, right? How have those relationships been sustained? Well, it's because James and I, when we have interactions, we feel mutually, we feel better for having had those, right? Because it's a reciprocal exchange, right? And I think that's, one area where maybe some brands could have a stronger focus.
Great. Okay, well, we're out of time. So in terms of next steps, you can download the survey. There's a big link there in green. If not, I've also just pasted it into the chat. And I think, Corey, you had a slide with some of the other data you've got available, which I'm guessing people can find over at on the resources page. I don't know if you can just toggle to that final slide again.
Seem to have lost control.
Oh, hang on. No. Okay. Maybe I'll just dump I think most of it's under resources, right? So I'll just provide the link.
Most of this will be found in our resource center on our web page.
Right. All right, great. And so I guess that's the best sort of next step for everyone. Head over and get some of the solutions will be on here.
Yeah, and if anybody has follow-up questions that you'd like me to kind of route through individually at Airship, I'm happy to do that. Just connect with me on LinkedIn.
Great. So we've dropped your LinkedIn a bit earlier. So great. All right. Well, thanks so much, Corey. Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Had a good insight into some of the data, I think, and that was great, Corey. I hope you have a brilliant day in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah,
and
thanks,
thanks for getting up so early and sharing all the great data. Thanks, Calvin. Thanks, Elizabeth. All right, thanks everyone.
Bye.